Hello and welcome back to K Marie TV, and you're watching Be More the Podcast. Let's get it. How is everyone doing? I can't believe we're still in January. This will be uploaded in February, but y'all, it's still January. We have about 2 more days until January's left, and I just still can't believe we are here. Let's wrap it up. To say it has been an eventful year already in the first month, I feel like honestly it's something we say every year at this point, but mentally, how are you doing? A lot of stuff is affecting a lot of people, which we will address on this episode. But mental health check in, how are we doing? I hope you're doing well. Me personally, a lot of trial and tribulations to say the least. I recently started therapy again, and it's a lot. I'm being challenged, and therapy is just not easy. Just know that's not easy, but I'm giving myself grace and I'm doing the fucking work. Y'all, they are doing some lawn. There's like, I live in the city. What are we mowing down? I don't know, but I just hope you guys don't hear it. And if you do, I apologize. So, this Devil's Advocate segment, I'm really curious on where you guys get your news sources from, right? I feel like it is very much divided, not only generationally, but also accessibility. Side one gets most of their news from socials. So, whether that's socially word of mouth, social media, they just get their news based off of their social environment. Whereas side two really values accredited sources to get their news. They'll really rely on publications, media news outlets, even some more traditional approaches to their media news consumption. So I'm curious about you guys as the digital landscape is changing drastically. I added a bonus, so like a combo of both. So for example, I follow the New York Post on Instagram. They essentially syndicate their articles into social media, right? That's kind of in the middle of both. That's a combination of a side. But if you had to pick one, are you social media type person who gets their news, social word of mouth, or are you side two, a more accredited type of approach? Side one argues essentially that they don't have time or the resources to really vet their sources. They don't have really that luxury of being able to subscribe or purchase those type of media outlets that are on a more premium level scale. They really aren't a political person is another reasonings I've heard to that, but also really don't like what comes with ingesting media. For example, there can be a lot of negativity and it just can be very overwhelming for people trying to digest that on the daily. So they just get the major stuff through word of mouth or social. Or they don't even trust news outlets. That has become more common as the days go on. Side two really focuses on publications, media outlets, news outlets, and believe that, word of mouth and social media isn't reliable. It's really biased and people's perception really does skew the facts. And people want to know the facts and believe that with these publications, that's where they can get the facts from. They also worry that, through word of mouth and social media, known facts checks, accredited sources do fact check. That is actually their job. So that's why side two really leads towards accredited sources. And they really don't like the biases that are implemented inside one. But what side are you on? Where do you get your news? Where do you get your tea? Where do you get your information? And don't tell me the shade room. Don't tell me the shade room. This episode, we're going to be talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in 2025. What it looks like, what is it, and how is it shifting the nation? I want to put a disclaimer out. I'm not trying to me, this is not a political topic. Unfortunately, it is in our politics today, but it's really not a political topic. If you take it this way, I don't apologize, but I'm sorry you feel that way because I am really remaining neutral in a lot of this, really looking at the facts of the information, really just trying to educate what DEI is and how it's changing in 2025 due to legislation, unfortunately. This episode has been in the works. Just know the original title was DEI in 2024, but we're in 2025. And then on top of it, so much has changed in the last 29 days. So we're gonna talk about it. So if you take offense and if you think it's all politically it's not that. But let's get into it. So what is DEI? DEIB, what does that mean? What is it? I'm gonna define it to you according to dictionary.com. and just follow me for a second. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, is an organizational framework which seeks to promote fair treatment and full participation of all people, particularly groups who have been historically underrepresented or subject to discrimination on the basis of identity and disability. That is the definition from dictionary.com of what DEI is. Okay. And I just want to note two words in that definition that is really important to me right now. All people. All people is in the definition of DEI. All people. I continue. I want to give example. So DEI is an organizational framework. What is an organizational framework? Like that might go over like what is that? And I just want to give like examples of other types of organizational frameworks because an organizational framework is essential to any organization, and all companies, all businesses use organizational frameworks. For example, departments. I'm in a marketing department, but there's also an HR department. There's a sales department. That's a type of framework. Dividing your employees based off their activities. Boom. Another type of framework could be chain of command. You have a CEO of a company and they have their executive suite, and then it goes into vice presidents, potentially managers, and then your direct reports. CEO all the way to the line worker at Amazon, for example. That's an organizational framework of a chain command. We even have that in the United States. Another one, just for example, is a division structure. Using Ben and Jerry's as an example, there's people divided based off their roles. So there's people who actually make and create different flavors of ice creams, but Ben and Jerry is also known for their advocacy work and what they do. They're not hiring those ice cream makers to talk about those. I'm not saying they're not doing that. I don't know the divisional structure at Ben and Jerry's, but those two individuals in those respective roles are structured so they're not doing the same. So that is what an organizational framework is. It's a framework that helps businesses essentially grow, be better at their job, and ultimately be a better company. Tea is piping. I want to give an example of DEI frameworks examples in an organization. I have had the amazing opportunity to be a part of the DEI subcommittee at my previous employer, and I was really involved. I have a lot of insight in terms of how DEI does affect a company. So that would look like education, number one, really just taking the time to educate and also doing trainings on biases off of, procedures, and just making sure that every individual on all people, let's keep all people the theme of this episode, that all people are educated, all people are trained, all people do not have any prejudice or bias against all people. Another example of DEI is ensuring that there's no unconscious bias when recruiting, hiring, and even during promotions, right? It's just looking at the data that you have, for example, and making sure that someone else is not being treated unfairly. Simple. They can have the same qualifications, but based off identity and disability, are we treating them any differently? It's that simple. And last one would be like, this is very give or pull with different organizations, but employee resource groups, there could be some resources provided for LGBTQ community that works at an organization. That is an example of an employee resource group that companies essentially need to take that step in order to provide that type of framework for its organization. So let's talk about what DEI is not. DEI is not ensuring other people get jobs. It's not ensuring other people get raises solely because they're a minority. DEI is not distreating a certain majority because they're not the priority. That is not what DEI is. DEI is to ensure all people are created equally based off its definition alone. Holding your hand while I say this. To me, I'm going to just share what DEI looked like before 2024. At least last year, I definitely felt DEI was taking less of focus from companies, right? And it's why I wanted to create this episode. It just was so clear to me that it's just not the priority as it was in 2020, for example. Right? Before 2024, DEI was a type of framework that made individuals that historically didn't feel heard or seen, making it a priority for those individuals to feel seen and heard. That looked like providing some resources to individuals that historically do not feel seen and heard. And it's so little when you're not a minority affected, right? So, for example, and this topic I know really irritates a lot of people in terms of like it's common sense, I don't get the reasoning. Of course I'm a man, of course I'm a woman. It really irritates a lot of people, but I urge you to listen to this with an open mind and really understand the impact of something so simple, even though you know who you are, right? Adding your pronouns, not even ensuring other people know your pronouns, but just adding your pronouns next to your name is for individuals that want to make sure that they're being respected and represented. Sure, you look like a man, and I can tell you're a man, and your pronouns are he, him. Definitely. It's not even to offend you, but it's just to make sure all people, so an individual who might, they're presenting as a man but wants to be called she, why are they not entitled to be called she? And why is it so bizarre for a business to take a new framework and implement it so your counterpart, your employee, feels seen and heard? That's not a moment for you to take personally. It's not a moment for you to take offense. It's a moment to take a step back and realize, wow, my colleague who has had people mispronoun them their entirety of working here is finally feeling some type of comfort working here now because people know what their pronouns are. Like, remove yourself from the equation and understand the impact it has on all people, right? It's not to say you're not the priority, but being that it's easy to identify you doesn't mean that it's easy to identify someone else, and someone just wants to feel respected and wants to be seen and heard. That's just an example of DEI and how it looked 2024, like pre 2024, and why and how it could affect someone that is not you. So it affects you directly, but it's really indirectly because it's bigger than you. Another example is providing resources to people of color within the organization. Historically, and we have to look at history here. I think that's the number one concern, at least to me, as to why these items are getting rolling back, is we're not looking at history. History historically has discriminated on major minority groups, and I'm not just talking about Black people. I'm talking about religion. I'm talking about different presenting people. Historically, the majority has been the priority. So this framework has allowed for businesses to take a step back and look at all the individuals contributing and making sure all individuals are being treated the same way the majority is. So adding resources specifically for people of color, it is not a direct threat to the majority. Again, it is not a direct threat to the majority when all the resources historically have been only for the majority. If there's resources that people of color cannot use that companies only promoting, is it reflective of all people? Because there's a threat and you're not the priority, you're taking it personally. And this is not the whole majority. This is not the whole majority at all whatsoever. It's just the individuals that don't understand and are very combative towards DEI. These are the statements they make, and not everything is about you. Holding your hand when I say that, and it's like no disrespect or anything, but are we just gonna allow history to repeat itself? That's the question you really need to ask yourself. Are you going to continue to allow history to repeat? In my experience at DEI, it allowed for so much honest conversation, just like this. It allowed the majority to take a step back and be like, oh shit, like I'm just so unconsciously biased. And there's nothing wrong with being unconsciously biased. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging that you didn't know something. There's nothing wrong in realizing that just based off history, you're at an advantage. You did nothing to gain that advantage. I did nothing to gain this disadvantage, but you are at an advantage. There's nothing wrong in admitting that, but there's something wrong when you try to take your power back. There is something wrong when you try to take your power back for no reason, for no valid reason at that. What happened in this last, 29 days that has really ruffled a lot of feathers? I'll tell you what happened. On January 21st, President Donald J. Trump had an executive order titled Ending Discrimination and Restoring Merit Based Opportunity. So it's an executive order, and essentially it is the termination of all federal, and I want to emphasize it's only the federal government practices of DEI. And it's been a lot because essentially it's impacting a lot of people, not just federal employees, but we're going to talk about that a little more. I want to take a step back and just reading the title of this executive order, Ending Discrimination and Restoring Merit-Based Opportunity. Who is being discriminated on with DEI efforts is my number one question. It is my number one question. Who is being discriminated on? Because there's a difference between not being the priority and being discriminated on. There is a major difference. And, when you read the definition of DEI, it's making sure all people are included. There's no discriminatory factors of DEI, but because individuals aren't the priority anymore, we need to revert back to the 1960s where individuals like Martin Luther King Jr. had to fight to be heard. Individuals had to get lynched. Individuals had to get threatened, get whipped to, go vote. Gain their basic rights as American citizen. They had to go the extreme mile, risking their life. That's discrimination. But not being a priority, is that discrimination? Again, that's just my question. Who is being discriminated on? Why is this in effect in terms of ending discrimination, right? And restoring merit-based opportunity. I understand it. I understand wanting to not be a quota. I don't want to be hired because you need to meet a quota for your Black individuals. Don't hire me if you're trying to meet a quota. I understand the merit-based opportunity, but if we talk history, if we talk resources in this United States, we need to be fucking honest. Yo, we need to understand that the majority in this country has an advantage of how they get educated. They're at an advantage of how, period. The majority has an advantage in their education. And it's not because of a skin color. It's because the generational resources they have to obtain that education. Let's go back to 2016 when actresses are calling schools to fake athletic capabilities so they can get scholarships. That type of advantage does not allow for merit-based opportunities to exist. Unfortunately, because we don't have an honest system. We don't have a system where integrity is at the forefront. People are going to do what the fuck they need to do to get their kid in a good school by any means. And that's anyone. That's a white, that's a Black person, that's an Asian person. They're going to do anything by any means to make sure their child can get a good education if that's what the child wants and needs. And if someone is a billionaire and doesn't have to pay what a single family home individual needs to pay in taxes, has more money at their disposal to get their child in a private school, to get their child to have unlimited testing with a private tutor, to get schools to lie on applications for them, they're going to do it. It's going to stop them. Ending discrimination and solely relying on merit based when you're not being real about what country we live in, where we're not looking at the historical events that happened less than 10 years ago. You really need to ask yourself, Who is this going to benefit? And why is this happening? Why are you trying to reverse executive orders from the 60s that has allowed all people to thrive? Why? That's a question for another day, but did I lie? Like, for real, comment below. Like, did I lie? I'm just talking through experience and I'm talking about what's being observed. At the end of the day, I am totally aligned if merit-based opportunity can just be merit-based. But unfortunately, it cannot be. And unfortunately, it's generational. We really have the same opportunity to get the same job, to get the same, not the same place in life, because life's what you make it. So let's make it right. Hannah Montana quote, yes, I did. But it's more so, will an employer who looks at schools, who looks at experience, will they give you that same opportunity meritly based? Okay. There's a lot of faith in individuals who have historically have never given that faith, never have given that grace. But I digress. The bad news is a lot of businesses are following suit. Talk about who's going to be impacted by this change and the reasons for this change. Only Donald Trump can essentially make this executive order on an executive level. So it's only mandated for federal workers. However, with this new presidency implemented, it's safe to say, because Donald Trump is a businessman, other businesses are going to follow his lead. A lot of business executives idolize Donald Trump because he's a successful businessman. That's the fact of the matter here. There has been a lot of companies taking the same approach. Think of Donald Trump as the CEO of America, which he is. He's our president. He's the leader of the free world. CEOs of Target, Walmart, Meta, Amazon, for example, are following their counterpart and taking the same actions. They're rolling back DEIs for their countries, right? For their organizations. And it's tough. According to the Times, about 5 to 10 of companies, has rolled back on DEI. It's businesses following businesses at this point. America is a country. America is a country. I'm just going to say that again. But when I put on my marketing hat for a second, when I look at campaigns and ads from Target, McDonald's especially, they were definitely targeting minorities. Let's be so for real. In 2020, 2021, all the ads I saw from a lot of these companies were minority focused. And now they're rolling back because at the end of the day, these companies are worried about their dollars. They're rolling back on DEI. Because this has started before Donald Trump has entered office. If we're being totally honest, DEI has become less and less of a priority. And now that our country's executive CEO has said, we're no longer focusing on this, it's the green light for these executives to take that mark. But do you want to know something so funny while I was doing research for this episode, guys? I'm looking for companies that have committed to DEI. And when I looked on Google, in 2022, there's an article, Hall of Fame, top companies dedicated to DEI. Top 50 companies, Target, CVS, Wells Fargo, Amazon, the same companies rolling back in 2025, less than 3 years. So when I put on my marketing hat, those campaigns they ran in 2022, it's for the dollar. They don't care about all inclusivity. They care about, oh, now all people, now I can market towards, i.e. LGBTQ, and I'll get more of their dollars because we're inclusive, but you're not. But you're not inclusive. You only care about your dollar mark, and go watch my podcast on being a cautious consumer. But your dollar is the power here at the end of the day. You as the consumer need to decide, ethically, can I support this? Ethically, is it benefiting me and my friends? And go from there. The irony of within 3 years, the top Hall of Fame companies are now rolling back doesn't surprise me. With that, I just want to say, be an ally. not only to yourself if you're a minority, but for your friends and family. It's a lot going on in the United States, and we can expect a lot to come. Unfortunately, I don't know what the future holds, not predicting the future, but change is happening now. So, are you going to be an advocate, or are you going to stay on the sidelines and not use your voice? I'm going to leave you with that one. I do want to highlight some companies that have committed to their DEI efforts. I saw this list on social media, so I'm not 1,000% sure on accuracy, but would love to share. Walgreens, Ulta, Go Foods, that's the parent company of Auntie Annie's, but they have recommitted DEI efforts. So if this affects you, hey, why don't you go support those businesses a bit more than those who rolled back? I'm curious, does this directly impact you? If so, how? I know this impacts me, but I know my worth. I know how value I am to any company that does hire me. And I'm not just a number, I'm not just a check mark. And if a company doesn't see that, the next one will. But how does it impact you or even your friends, for example? With this new change in the DEI landscape, what big or small ways can you make a change with this rollback? I know there are some boycotts in discussion. I know there's new supports in discussion, but how are you entering the chat with these changes? Let me know. I'm curious. If you stay to the end, thanks for watching. I really tried not to be so politically forward in this episode, but I do think we do have a really concerning change happening right now. And it's only fair for me to be that advocate and talk about it from a non-biased and a straightforward point of view. So I hope you enjoyed. And if you want to see more episodes from me, give me a like, give me a comment, let me know your thoughts. But until next time, I hope you could be more. Alrighty, bye.